Okay, everyone from the waiting room has joined us.
Okay, thank you, Jordan. Good afternoon, everybody. I am Jean Cook, Chair of the Mississippi Charter School Authorizer Board. This is a special call meeting of the MCSAB. It's being held today, Monday, April 17th, 2023, at 1 p.m. via Zoom teleconference means pursuant to Mississippi Code annotated 2541-5. The notice of this meeting, which included the date, time, place, and purpose of the meeting, are identified the virtual attendance available to the public has been posted. An audio recording is being made of this meeting and minutes will be recorded. This meeting is being called to order at 1:02 p.m. Monday, April 17th, 2023. We'll move on to the establishment of a quorum. As I call the name of board members, please state the location of your presence for the meeting. I'm Jean Cook and I'm present in Jackson, Mississippi. Lee Durrett.
Present in Tupelo, Mississippi.
Thank you. Don Hinton. Thank you. Kimberly Remack.
Present in South Haven, Mississippi.
Thank you. Candace Robbins.
Present in Clinton, Mississippi.
Thank you. Marcy Scoggins.
Present in Jackson, Mississippi.
Thank you. Jennifer Whittier.
Present in Brookhaven, Mississippi.
Thank you. A quorum is present for conducting this meeting, so we'll move on to the adoption of the agenda. And I will entertain a motion for approval of today's agenda. Please identify yourself for the record.
I so move. Candace Robbins.
Thank you. Can I get a second?
Second, Jennifer Whittier.
Okay, second. Is there any discussion? Okay, let's see. Do I need a roll call for every vote since we're on different places here? Is that advisable, Amy? No? Okay, all those in favor? Oh, go ahead, Amy.
No, I was going to say no, not for
Okay.
this one.
Oh, not for this one. Okay, all those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, the motion carries. Next, we're going to move on to the public comment, and I just want to add, please, to all board members and members who are here attending from the public, please refrain today from using the chat. We did use it last week for a burning question, but it kind of grew beyond that intention. So moving forward, we won't be using the chat. So we have 3 requests to give public comment today, and each speaker has been allotted 5 minutes. And our first speaker is Miss Amanda Johnson from Clarksdale Collegiate, who has requested to speak about the school's renewal application.
Chair Cook, I appreciate the time. I always enjoy being able to interact with the Charter School Authorizing Board, and so I appreciate the time today. As I was reflecting on the meeting from last week and taking time to prepare for this special call meeting, there are a couple of things that came to mind that I wanted to share with you all. First of all, and this is aligned with my written comments, is that I do believe that Clarksdale Collegiate scholars, families, team have earned a 5-year renewal. I believe that a 5-year renewal will demonstrate stability to our families and our team, and also to lenders and funders. And we believe that it aligns with statute and what we have worked hard to earn. In my written report, I gave you some information, all from documents that were created by MCSAB or produced by you guys or supported by you all. And my 2 biggest arguments were that I felt like the renewal, or I contend that the renewal recommendation report was not aligned to what's in our contract and what's in state statute, where it should be aligned to our performance frameworks. All of the performance frameworks, all of the ratings included in our performance framework that weren't waived due to COVID, all stated that we met expectations in the 3 areas that you measure. Those 3 areas align to the renewal application and guidance. And so it was a surprise to me to see a 3-year renewal and not the full 5 years. And so I do believe that it's not in alignment with our contract and not in alignment with statute. Secondly, I pointed out in the written statement that not aligning to what's in the statute and in contract and going with a process that is unstated, undocumented, basically leads to confusion, and it lacks transparency. And so all of that is there, and I'm happy to answer any questions about some of the things that I included in my written response. But the most important reflection that I had coming into this meeting was that you guys have a lot of information, a lot of documentation to review. We have a lot of information and data because we're here on the ground running the school day to day. But somehow we're ending up on a different, at a different space. And so what I ask for you guys is to engage in dialogue with me at the table. So you had, I think what's missing is us having a conversation about what actually you guys are expecting and looking for if it's not aligned to the performance framework. I think there's an opportunity, there's a lot of detail and data that just needs to have context. And so let's have a conversation about it. That's the piece that feels very missing to me. And I feel like if we could do that, then we could make a decision, that you can make a decision that is informed and is in the best interest of kids. And so I ask that either in this point, you ask some questions about things that I presented, if it feels wrong or if it feels not quite aligned with what you've received before or what you understood. When you had the meeting last week, brought in a contractor to have a conversation and presented for about an hour. Bring me to the table, ask me questions. I think that's the piece where it's missing, where I feel like we can eliminate any confusion, we can eliminate and increase and infuse collaboration and infuse confidence into this process. That is what I'm asking for. There's nothing against Robert Rules of Order to bringing someone who's not on the board to have a conversation like you've done in the past. And so I ask that you bring me into the conversation before you make your vote, especially if there's any questions that are unanswered, or if you need to understand why I included some of the pieces that I did, or why we feel so strongly about a 5-year renewal, or even just questions about the data if you're unsure about what the data actually means. I'm happy to engage in that conversation. And I think at minimum, our kids deserve that. And I know that you all are working in the best interest of kids. We are working in the best interest of kids. So we're aligned on that. So let's get together and align on what you expect of Clarksdale Collegiate in the next 5 years and what you want to see from us and any questions that you have. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Okay. Our next speaker is Mr. David Endem from Level Field Partners, who has requested to speak about the potential impact of a 3-year renewal on Clarksdale's ability to secure financing for growth.
Thank you so much, and thank you for allowing me the time to speak with the board. I did submit written comments, and my intent today is just to summarize those and verbally and make time for any questions that the board may have. Again, my name is David Endem. I'm a co-founder of a firm called Level Field Partners. And the mission of our organization is to help solve facilities and finance-related challenges for high-quality charter schools across the country by providing best-in-class technical assistance and by being a solutions-oriented lender. Over the past 5+ years, our team has supported more than 130 different charter schools and related organizations in 30 different states on a wide range of project needs. Specifically in the state of Mississippi, we have worked with Clarksdale Collegiate since late 2019, Ambition Prep, and LaFleur Legacy. As I described in my submitted written comments, I firmly believe that a 3-year renewal for Clarksdale Collegiate would have materially negative and likely long-lasting financial implications for the school and limit its ability to grow and invest in its core program of educating Clarksdale's children. The reason I make that statement are as follows. The universe of lenders who are comfortable financing charter school facilities projects is a limited one. A 3-year renewal would amplify the existential non-renewal risk that lenders would have to get comfortable with, a risk which is already increased due to the limited nature of the Clarksdale market. Most lenders will struggle to approve any new loans to Clarksdale during a 3-year renewal term, or would do so, but only with onerous terms like higher interest rates, accelerated repayment schedules, higher equity contribution requirements, just to name a few. And if Clarksdale is unable to access conventional sources of facility financing, the tangible implications for the school would be financing the planned construction of its high school facility will be incredibly challenging at best, or simply not possible at worst, thereby causing at least a 3-year delay in the launch of that school, obviously pending the approval of that charter application. Secondly, refinancing Clarksdale Collegiate's existing loans that mature in October 2025 would be similarly challenging and thereby place increased financial pressure on Clarksdale's existing K-8 program in the event that Clarksdale is unable to secure or work out some sort of extension from its current and highly supportive lenders past its spring 2026 renewal timeframe. More broadly speaking, since the Mississippi Charter School is still relatively new, I also believe that the financial and financing implications for today's renewal decisions will extend well beyond Clarksdale Collegiate and will have a lasting effect for all Mississippi charter schools in the future. Specifically, a 3-year renewal could very well have a chilling effect on lenders' future interest in lending to charter schools, particularly newer ones in the state of Mississippi. Again, thank you for your time and consideration. Should you have any questions, I'd be more than happy to address them.
Sorry, I was muted. Okay, thank you. Our final speaker is Dr. Christy Hendricks from Midtown Partners, who has requested to speak about Midtown Public's renewal recommendation. Oh, Dr. Hendricks, I can't hear you. You don't appear to be muted, but I see you talking.
Hey, how about now?
Yes.
Okay, sorry about that. I'm again asking this week for your strong consideration in amending the reviewer's recommendation presented last week on behalf of Midtown Public and allow Midtown Public to move forward with the kindergarten and renew for a 5-year term. There were a couple of important pieces that I really wanted to circle back on for clarity from last week's meeting related to data. Last week, the reviewer mentioned on several occasions proficiency scores not being at the levels needed to demonstrate academic success of the charter schools. I think it's extremely important to mention that Mississippi's accountability model is not solely based on proficiency levels in districts, but there are many other factors that go into determining progress towards success and ultimately the assigned letter grades, with academic growth being one of those. At Midtown Public, students are coming to us at the middle school level significantly behind, 2 to 3 years, and in some instances further than that if they're entering one of our higher grades, say 7th or 8th. So the expectation that we would be able to move them to proficiency during the school year is not reasonable. However, the expectation that the students would grow, and specifically being able to grow the lowest 25% is. That is where Midtown Public receives the majority of the points that attribute to our letter grade. For example, it was reported that Midtown Public only outperformed 3 JPS middle schools in ELA for proficiency. That in fact is true. However, we outscored 6 of the 8 JPS middle schools in growth and 5 of the 8 middle schools in growth of the lowest 25%. That demonstrates a slightly different picture of ability than just outscoring 3 schools as it relates to proficiency. Also, upon reviewing the framework reports, you'll see that Midtown Public met expectations in all areas for the 2021-2022 school year. Ultimately, we hope that by starting with the kindergarten and working up, that will not only, we will not have the issue of trying to catch students up who are years behind. And then, of course, proficiency would be more relevant for us. However, until we get to that point, the majority of the families who are looking for another option are those who have students who are currently struggling, either academically or behaviorally, socially, in which research shows in many instances that these two factors are indeed related to outcomes. I also want to reiterate that because we have already hired staff for the kindergarten, we've recruited students, we've purchased equipment, materials, and signed leases because of the previous approval back in December for the expansion. Finally, I want to again mention about the limitation that will be placed on us if a 3-year renewal is approved as opposed to a 5 related to financing. I have been informed by the organization handling the emergency facility relief loan funding that with a 3-year renewal, we will essentially have 2 options: to withdraw our request to participate in the loan program or come up with a plan on how we would repay the loan that is intended for 10 years for traditional public schools. We would have to repay that on a 3-year term, which would be cost prohibitive for us. For these reasons, I would ask your strong consideration in approving Midtown to move forward with the kindergarten as approved and with a 5-year term. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Hendricks. I thank you to all the speakers. I would like to make a couple of remarks before we move on behalf of the authorizer board staff and board members. I want to acknowledge and appreciate both the written and spoken comments from school leaders and those in advocacy roles in the charter sector. I want to reiterate the board members' utmost confidence that the authorizer staff has followed the letter and spirit of the law throughout the renewal process. And I want to remind board members that the Mississippi Charter Law outlines 3 components of the renewal process: the performance framework, of course, the renewal application, and a public report summarizing the evidence that is the basis for the renewal decision. So board members have been provided with all 3 of these components. And while the law states that the board must base and ground its renewal decision in the performance framework, it does not limit us to considering only those frameworks. In fact, the law requires schools to be given the opportunity in the application to share additional evidence beyond the data contained in the annual performance framework reports. And this clearly demonstrates the board's obligation to consider a summary of the charter school's performance over time. And school leaders have spent countless hours preparing their renewal applications and subsequent materials. And the authorizer staff has spent countless hours preparing information for the board, reviewing data to ensure accuracy, responding to questions from school leaders, evaluators, board members, and those in advocacy roles. And I'm confident that school leaders and the authorizer staff have worked diligently to ensure that the board has everything necessary to make high-stakes decisions legally, with good conscience, and in alignment with our mission to authorize high-quality charter schools. And I know that each board member has also spent countless hours and has exercised their due diligence in reviewing and considering all necessary information. And I trust all board members will remain focused on what is best for children as we move through this decision today. Next, we'll move on. There's a couple of information items on the agenda. Number 5 is the submission of data, views, and arguments, a link to the agenda. And the board has received several submissions of data, views, and arguments, and those were shared via the packet prior to the meeting. And these have all been linked to the agenda, as I said. So now we will move on to a new business. First to our information items. The first is the charter school renewal presentation. And as a reminder to the board, prior to our last meeting to consider the renewal decisions for these schools, we were provided presentation slides for thoughtful renewal decision making. We were reminded by Dr. Kamacharya that although advisable for boards to accept recommendations from a neutral third-party evaluators, we retain the full authority and discretion to consider other options or a combination thereof. So, Dr. Kamacharya, can you remind the board of what options we have considering renewals and walk us through any other links on the agenda that have not been mentioned?
Sure. Yes, ma'am. Thank you, Madam Chair. If Jordan, if you would please click that link and go to that last slide on here. Prior to the last meeting, I did provide this document to the board, to the entire board, with all of the thoughtful questions for decision making. And in addition to that, some options for the board to consider as they make high stakes decisions. Jordan, I think it's the last slide on there for the options. Additionally, I shared this presentation with the general public and the school leaders and all who were in attendance at the last board meeting, just to give you a sense of what the timeline looks like, what the options were for, or what the conditions are around renewal decision making for the board members. In particular, this is one slide that I want to point out here. This document, this slide was given to the board prior to our meeting on the 10th. And I'll point out these options here, which are again, options that the board may consider in its discretion. It has full authority to do so under the statute. And it can do such things as accept the presented third-party evaluator's report based on relevant information collected throughout the contract term, and it can accept it as it's presented. It could also accept the third-party report with board revisions, and it can add or remove or modify any condition or term that was recommended by the third party. The board could also consider a 5-year renewal with no conditions for every school, or a 5-year renewal with no conditions for some schools, or the opposite thereof, right? It could also recommend 5-year renewal with conditions. So the board in its discretion could also require academic SMART plans for improvement for every school or no school. It could require SMART plans for monitoring and reporting for every school or no school. It could require midterm site visits or school quality reviews in the beginning of a new contract term or midterm or toward the end prior to renewal again. So the board was provided a plethora of options to consider, as well as several different questions to consider, whether they align to the statute, whether their decision aligned to the mission. Jordan, if you'd kind of scroll back up, please. How their decision was going to impact the general public, the general charter community, the landscape, politically. What is my decision going to say to the future of charter schools in Mississippi? Who is impacted by this? Who will be burdened by it? Who will be supported by it? What precedents will my decision make? And what precedents will the collective decision set for the future of charter schools in Mississippi? And most importantly, as what Chair Cook referenced, is my decision in the best interest of children? And so additionally, the board had all of this information prior to the board meeting on the 10th. And I just wanted to share this again with the general public, including these last few slides, so that you are well aware that the board was provided additional considerations for renewal options for our schools that were in renewal. Okay, if we can go back to the agenda then. Okay, thank you, Jordan. The next item on the agenda is just a link to the renewal process timeline. And then there are several links included in there that demonstrate our commitment to the timeline and to the process and to the statute. So you can see very clearly when the renewal application and guidance was board approved, when the rubric was board approved, when it was the RFP for a third-party reviewer was released to the public, when that was approved, the amount of money that the board committed to contracting with the Learning Collective. You can see the dates that the school received their notice, their renewal training, their applications, when they were turned into us, when those draft recommendations reports were due and disseminated back to the schools, and the deadline for response. Additionally, the application includes milestones, and included in those milestones are links to statutory requirements. Each one of those are included here. So you can see when the letter to the charter schools in their final contract year is due before September 30th. If you click on those links will take you directly to the communication that was sent to the schools to notify them of their potential eligibility, because the state accountability model results were not released until after that deadline. And you can see our communication directly to schools throughout this entire process. You can see communication to the Learning Collective, who is our third-party reviewer. And so this is, again, in an effort to be 100% transparent. You can see everything, all of the communication that's provided here in line with the milestones. I think, Madam Chair, that's it.
Yes, thank you.
Going back to the agenda, I think we're, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Any questions that the board may have, I'm happy to entertain.
Are there any questions for Dr. Karmacharia from the board members? Okay. Before we get to our action items, I've asked Amy if she would just give us a quick primer on Robert's rules. So yeah, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Because we did have some confusion with the way the motions were handled in the last meeting, Chair Cook asked me to speak briefly about our adherence to Robert's Rules of Order so that we can follow these rules as is specified in our bylaws. As a reminder, the chair is the authority in matters of procedure. And this is the procedure we will follow for this and subsequent meetings. Board members must be recognized by the chair to speak. The chair has the floor and then gives it to the member who is requesting to speak. Seconding a motion does not mean that you agree with the motion. It means that you want to discuss the motion. The chair can suggest amendments before the discussion begins on a motion to avoid amending the motion if possible. The chair will state the motion before discussion and before the vote so we can be sure what we're voting on. And as a reminder, proper decorum is required by Robert's Rules of Order. So please remember that while you may disagree with your fellow board members, you must still treat them with respect, courtesy, and politeness as you would hope to be treated. And I will be monitoring the procedure in this meeting and will alert Madam Chair if any breaches of procedure occur.
Okay. Thank you, Amy. Okay. Any questions for Amy from board members?
I have a question. So how do we address, do we need to raise our hands or we just say, you know?
I think we could just chime in like you just did is fine. Okay. Yeah. Thank you. All right. Okay. So now we're going to move on to our first action item. C is to consider approval of Clarksdale Collegiate renewal decision. So I will entertain a motion for Clarksdale renewal recommendation that was in the evaluators, third-party evaluators report that you've received.
Madam Chair, may I make a motion?
Yes, you may. Yes, you may. So it's Jennifer Whittier speaking. So you're making a motion, just to be clear, to for Clarksdale renewal recommendation in the third-party evaluator report.
Exactly.
Okay. Can I get a second to that motion?
I make a motion that we second it.
Okay. So we have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion on this motion?
Shall I read my motion?
Well, the motion that you made, from what I understand, because I've entertained,
No,
yeah, I'm sorry, Kimberly, am I doing this right? Amy, I thought I was doing it right, or is?
As I understand it, you were expecting a motion to accept the recommendation of the third-party reviewer. So if that's not the motion that Jennifer was making, then we should just start there. And if we don't get a motion for that,
Okay.
you would ask for a different motion or ask for a motion on the same topic.
Okay, so I'm gonna clarify my my question for my ask for a motion. So I will entertain a motion to accept the recommendation in the third party's evaluator report for Clarksdale's renewal. Okay, so I've heard no motion. I've heard no one make that motion.
Wait, I'm sorry.
Mhm.
I'm getting slightly confused. So
Okay.
I'm making sure that you are asking, seeing if someone wants to make a motion as it relates to Clarksdale Collegiate
Mhm.
and the recommendations that, and so Jennifer didn't do that.
I don't believe that's what Jennifer's
No, not
intention
for
was.
that. No,
Okay.
I have another motion.
Okay. Did that answer your question, Candace?
I think so. So I'm
Yeah.
assuming she's about to make the motion now, right?
Okay, so let me dispense with this first motion. So we had two motions last week, basically to accept the recommendation from the evaluator for both schools. I know we're talking about Clarksdale right now. So we tabled those. So we still have to deal with them. We have to either accept them or reject them, and come on. And if no one's going to make a motion to accept it, then I will open it up for new motions regarding the renewal decision on Clarksdale. So is that clear, Candace, from what I said, and to everybody else? Or if it's
think
not
so.
clear? Okay. So I've asked for a motion to accept the evaluator's recommendation regarding Clarksdale's renewal, which was just for 3 years. I have not heard anybody make that motion. So therefore, that motion is there's no motion for that. So now would somebody like to make another motion regarding Clarksdale's renewal?
I
And if
would
so, okay.
like to make another motion
Okay,
concerning Clarksdale's renewal.
okay,
Jennifer here.
okay, Jennifer, what is that motion exactly?
I'd like to make a motion that the board approve a 4-year conditional renewal for Clarksdale Collegiate. Those conditions have been presented by Dr. Carmencharia, but I'm hoping she will be available to clarify those conditions if necessary.
Okay. All right, so I'm going to summarize your motion because it needs a little more information in it, I believe. So you're making a motion to renew Clarksdale for 4 years with conditions, and you referenced Dr. Carmencharia's slide that she just had up, I believe.
Correct.
Conditions. Amy, do we need to spell out what those conditions are? Can we handle those in discussion, or?
I think that would be appropriate. Yes. So everybody has all the information they need.
Okay, so we have to spell them out now in the motion. Okay, all right, so let's,
So, oh,
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Madam Chair.
yes, Dr.
Do I
Carmencharia, go
Do I
ahead.
need to clarify those conditions that were on the slide?
Yes, please, to see if that's what Jennifer is intending to put in her motion.
Okay,
Yes.
the only conditions that were alluded to in the slide would be to require SMART goals, academic SMART goals for school improvement, to require a SMART plan be in place for monitoring and reporting, and then to require a baseline midterm site visit, school quality review of some sort. So you'll see on that bottom graphic there are some options that the board could consider for either for a full 5-year, or it's not noted here, but certainly with respect to your motion, be a 4-year recommendation. The board can choose to non-renew, or give any year anywhere from a 1 year to a full 5-year renewal. With or without conditions, but those would be the conditions that I think you were alluding to in your motion.
Yes. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
And for clarity, Dr. Carmencharia, the SMART plan, SMART's an acronym, which I know education people love. Can you, and I know that there was a SMART plan recommendation in Midtowns. Is this, should we think of this as a similar one, or what is SMART?
Yeah,
What's a
yes,
SMART
thank you.
acronym?
Great question. And yes, I'm happy to share that. A SMART goal or a SMART plan would be something that is specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and time specific or time bound. Sometimes you'll hear it said a couple of different ways, but in general, your goals would be very specific goals related to an academic performance. Could be grade level, subject area, depending on the areas of need. They would need to be measurable based on an agreement between the authorizer and the school. They would need to be attainable and realistic, and then time specific. So that is what a SMART goal is, or a SMART plan in the second bullet there.
Okay. And so, all right, thank you. So we have a motion from Jennifer for a 4-year renewal for Clarksdale with the conditions in these 3 bullets on this slide, which are to require academic SMART plan for improvement, require a SMART plan for monitoring and reporting, and require midterm site visit and school quality review. Does that capture, Jennifer, your motion?
Yes, it does.
Okay.
Right.
So Oh,
I would just interject that I noted just in my vocal conversation here, not on this slide, and the board has its full discretion to do anything that it chooses, but noted there could be a baseline. So you could, you know, you could have a baseline visit by a school reviewer or the authorizer board, and you could do a school quality review to kind of set a baseline. And you could do a midterm site visit, or you could do a renewal visit. You can do it, set it up however you want, and the language would be there however the board chooses. You will recall we did not do site visits for this renewal, and that's something that is important to getting back to even our application cycle a year ago. We talked about site visits and the importance of site visits as opposed to a desk audit.
Okay. Okay. Can I get is there a second to this motion? And please identify yourself for the record.
This is, sorry,
Yes, Ms. Rumack speaking.
I'm sorry. I'm having a lot of interference because I'm on the phone.
Okay.
So I heard you say that you needed, the floor was open for a second motion.
Yes, that's correct. That's
Okay,
correct.
I'm going to second Jennifer's motion and approve the renewal for 4 years, subject to those conditions that were given.
Okay. Thank you, Kimberly Remack.
Thank
so
you.
Now we're at the discussion phase. So I see Candace is unmuted, so you have the floor.
I can go ahead. So I'm gonna try to gather my thoughts. And so given the information that's provided, and something that we talked about the last time that we gathered was, if you go back up, I think a few pages where it talks about when we make our decisions about using more than just one particular item here. And so I want us to be thoughtful there, but just for complete transparency, as far as the evaluator, I don't feel that he did the best job or gave the best argument in relation as to the findings that they had. He did not seem prepared to answer a lot of the questions that was requested. There was some information that was incorrect. And so I'm not even sure if that's something that's worth firm standing on. And also, I do want to acknowledge the fact that we do have our own performance framework that we're using, and that they met their expectations. And so for there to be another third party to come in, it just seems like a duplication of effort. And everything that seemed to be fair at that moment, based on what we have with our own framework, and not to mention that we annually assess each, and correct me if I'm wrong, Lisa, but we do annually do a report or some kind of findings from each charter school. Is that correct, Lisa, annually?
Yes, ma'am.
Or
And
something
I
that we
would,
said that
yes,
was-
yes, ma'am. And so you'll recall, Candace, that for 2 years, the board engaged in a renewal of the performance framework. I believe Dawn was on that committee, Jean, maybe, we had some other members that were on there. But we engaged in a full, I guess a full what's the word I'm looking for this afternoon? We redid the entire framework.
Yeah.
And so we looked at we had a group come in, and we spent about 2 years to analyze our current framework that we had back in 19, and when I got to the authorizer, and then revise that entire framework. And so there was a period of time where schools had waivers based on COVID, and schools had some relief from state assessments and things like that were involved. And so to answer your question, yes, we are obligated by statute to do so annually using a framework. This particular renewal cycle was aligned to both frameworks. So you had some 19 earlier frameworks, and then you had the newer framework. The framework that you had that had everything included in it that was given to the schools, that was the first time that they were actually evaluated using the new performance framework. There was a trial run done where the schools had data, so they had impact data that they could look at from the previous year. But this was the first time that schools were. So it was a combination of frameworks for the evaluator and for the schools.
But going forward, there's still an annual performance.
absolutely.
Right,
It's
that
an
that will
indication.
indicate if, I guess, any red flags that's needed. So another thing I wanted to make mention and just bring to the table about using, I guess, not just one particular entity for information, but also considering things that as a board that we've heard, that we've seen, even last year, I think Clarksdale Collegiate came in, we saw parents and students that came in and they spoke. I remember even last year, maybe last year, or the year before last, we did a tour at Midtown and we were supposed to go to another school. And at a moment's notice, they opened their doors in full transparency and gave us the opportunity to come in and talk to teachers and to sit in the classrooms. Like, I think, Lisa, what was it, like an hour or two notice? Was it the same day notice that they allowed us to come in, which also shows their confidence in their school and their openness to work with us. And I think we should at least be flexible to open, to work alongside with them, because these are the people, these are the hands and the feet that are serving our communities. And it's very, very important that I think that we listen to them, as well as the data that we have that the authorizing board have already approved on our end with our annual framework, versus casting our eggs into this third party evaluator who comes in and they see numbers and they see data, but they don't see the people, and they don't see the teachers and the administration that are really doing the work. And that also to a point that Christy said earlier about bringing in consideration of taking in, I mean, these schools are graduating students that are at proficiency level, and then they are bringing in students who are not at level, and it takes usually a year or two just to get them to proficiency. And so it's just, this is an important matter. You've already had someone else to speak about the importance of the financial issues, the barriers. And then even if we did a contingency plan where we added something, what was it, the 5 years with conditions, I mean, they're already jumping, in my opinion, my only opinion, they already have to do these annual renewals every year. These will be additional hoops that they have to jump in order to continue to run their schools, when they could be spending more of their time actually running their school instead of trying to prepare for, an evaluation or going through the motions of that, where, I'm just let them run the schools and let their work continue on, if we can help in that way. So that's all my thoughts.
Okay. Thank you. Are there any other discussion among any other board members? Have questions, comments?
Hey, this is Lee Durham. May I
Lee,
be recognized to speak?
Yes, you're recognized.
Sure. And so I guess kind of to piggyback on what Candace was saying, I feel that somehow that we have decided that Clarksdale is not worthy of a 5-year renewal, but I don't know that anybody knows why. We've got conflicting reports from the third party. By our own performance frameworks, they've met criteria. Smilo Academy went through 5-year renewal, no conditions. And my recollection was on those, they approached the criteria for 2 of the 3 and met the criteria for 1, academic. Clarksdale has met the criteria for 2, even on the third party evaluators standpoint. And they approach on a third. It just seems to me that, again, we're apt to follow this third party recommendation without really knowing why. I asked him specifically, is there a negative? Is there a drawback for, from a 3 to a 5? And he couldn't really enunciate one, other than to say, well, those kids will be in that school longer. I believe Jennifer asked him, well, is academic, is that criteria the most important? And he said, no, not really. So, in looking at the landscape, it seems like, I don't know, that we're punishing these schools for not meeting some criteria, but we don't know exactly how they haven't met it, because based on some criteria that we've put out there, they have met it. And rather than putting up, these conditions for them to meet in order to justify, a 3 or a 4 or a 5, I agree with Candace. They've got enough on their plates as it is. We've come up with these SMART goals and SMART plans, but no one has identified exactly what that's going to be, how that's going to be operated, who looks over that, when do those things have to be in, what the criteria is for that. And so it seems to me that if we take the information at its face value and we do what we say we're supposed to do, which is make a decision that's in the best interest of the children, then we don't need to put them in a financial situation or a financial distress. What we've already heard is a real possibility. And if you look at their grades and their ratings, they are making strides. Again, we're not looking at schools that have had a 10 or 15-year track record. These have had a very short trial run, and we had COVID right in the middle of that. And so, we're making big decisions. But I think we need to make it. That can't be made in a vacuum. It seems to me that they are entitled. If Smilo Academy is entitled to 5, then Clarksdale should be entitled to 5. We've got to be consistent on how we look at this and how we judge it. And sometimes it's okay to say, we don't really know everything, the ins and the outs. We don't know what's going to happen in the future, but we trust you. And we trust that you're going to make the best decision in the interest of the kids, and let them do that and give them some time to make that happen. So I certainly don't think that they should not be extended. They absolutely should. But I disagree with a 4-year extension. And I disagree with conditions. It seems they've earned the right for a 5-year and without conditions. So that's all I have to say.
Thank you. Any other board members have comments or questions?
Madam Chair, I have a question, please.
Yes, Marcy, go ahead.
Kind of to Lee's point, I would love to know, or do we have to define what those SMART goals look like for Clarksdale? How does that work? How do we lay that out? I need a little more information on that and what those would address specifically.
Okay. Dr. Karmacharya, can you address that?
Yes, ma'am. Yes. Marcy, in the past, with my experience, when we've had a school that was renewed and had conditions, they were very specific conditions that the school had to meet. In this case, if we were to, or the board were to afford a renewal with conditions for Clarksdale, those conditions such as establishing SMART goals would need to be in collaboration with. So they wouldn't be established today. They would be based on data, based on student performance, because they would be around academics, and they would need to be very specific. So alluding to, like I said earlier, it might be around 3rd grade proficiency, or it might be around 4th grade math. It could be, just depends on the school and the academic performance of the school. We will have additional data when the data are released, and typically in the summertime. So there would be additional data available to set some sort of SMART goals with the schools. Already the schools are required to set in collaboration with goals for their student performance. So we can certainly build off of that, or if the board were to include these conditions, we could certainly build on those. But they would not have to be established today. It would just be a reference to requiring the schools to work closer with the authorizer in setting those particular goals. So I don't know if that answers your question or not.
Yes, ma'am, it does.
Okay.
And I have some questions about, well, I'll bring that up later.
Oh, okay.
Marcy, I wanted to say, I think we'll be voting after this. So if you have some questions, you may want to bring it up now.
Marcy, were you finished on this topic?
I'm finished on this topic. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Do any other board members have questions or comments? Okay. I would just like to make a comment and maybe ask Dr. Karmacharya to clarify something. So the performance framework is not an application that the schools have to do annually. The performance framework is basically an accountability system that the charter authorizer board completes reviews with the school. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And the renewal application is what's done when the school is up for renewal. So this school would be doing a renewal application if this motion were to pass 4 years from now, or 3 years in preparation for the 4th year, I guess is that right?
That's
okay.
correct.
And then one other just comment I had is that I would expect that the schools that are in need of improvement academically would have a plan for improvement. So I would expect there to be some kind of plan already. Clarksdale is rated a D. I know that's only one data point, but there's a lot rolls up into that. Smilo Collegiate is rated a B, and they both went through COVID and had the same application cycle. So I just want to lift that out, because if we just treat everyone the same and everyone gets the 5 years and it's all things being equal, then I think it's important to kind of look a little at all the factors. And I know there's many factors. So I just wanted to lift that point out. So before I restate the motion and call for a vote, is there any other comments or questions from board members?
Yeah, I have a question. I'm just making sure
Okay.
that I'm getting this correct.
Okay.
And so part of our responsibility as a board member is, if we see or based on the annual reviews, if we see any calls for reviewing or editing, or some kind of big red flag, like, we do have the authority to be able to evaluate and deal with matters if that arises, if that happens.
I'm not sure what you're asking. Where the board is reviewing the annual performance framework.
So I'm sorry, you can go ahead and finish it, then I'll say something.
No, go ahead.
No, so I guess what I'm asking, like, if there were red flags, if it was like, oh my goodness, this is happening, the school is on fire practically, and there's just some negative things that are happening, we do have the authority to convene and be able to deal with that issue. Like, they wouldn't just, I guess that's what I'm asking. If there was something that we saw that was just terrible, right? And you can see it on your findings ahead of time or during that time, just getting clarity there.
I can answer that for you.
Okay.
Chair. The board has full authority to do several things. One is to approve applications during an application cycle, to approve a new school to operate. They can revoke a charter, they can choose to non-renew, or they can renew with full term or renew with condition. So the board has statutory authority to intervene should there be, as you said, a red flag, or the school is on fire. The board certainly has that authority and should be obligated to do so in the event that something egregious had happened.
Yeah.
Does that answer your question, Candace?
Yeah. I have one more.
Okay, go ahead.
Thing, or just a concern. So Smilo is a K4 and Clarksdale is a K5. So would that impact the accountability when it comes to testing or anything like that?
They have one more year of tests.
Okay.
The one with the 5.
Okay.
With the 5. Yeah. Okay. Any other questions or comments? Okay.
One question
So
on the determination of the SMART goals and that sort of stuff. Who would do that?
Oh, Dr. Karmacharya?
I'm sorry, John, I couldn't quite hear you.
Yeah, kind of low.
If we're going to establish SMART goals or SMART plan, I understand about the in-school inspections and that sort of stuff. That's pretty self-explanatory. But as far as who actually establishes the SMART goals or the SMART conditions, what is, I mean, you answered it a little bit a minute ago, but not with specificity as to who that would be.
Yeah, I think that would have to be, and again, let me preface this with whatever the board recommends and how the board chooses to establish that, that would be in collaboration with the authorizer board. We are ultimately responsible for overseeing the performance and accountability of the charter school. So in collaboration with staff, establish any type of SMART goal or any type of school improvement plan that the board sees fit to require the school. The board can be specific or as specific as they have been in the past, or non-specific based on whatever their decision might be.
I see Amanda's hand up, and I would ask the same thing for Christy Midtown, because I know they're next on the agenda, but because we're specifically talking about her school, it would be great to hear any responses that she would have into, clearing up anything, or she's been patient raising her hands. So I don't know if that's something that there's a lot of time for, but I know this is time for discussion, and since she's here, it just makes sense for her to be allowed to speak on behalf of her school.
Okay, so I want to hear from Ms. Johnson, and then I'll restate the motion and call for the vote. Ms. Johnson, go ahead.
Thank you. I appreciate getting the opportunity. There are just a couple of things that I wanted to point out. Dr. Kamacharya mentioned the amount of time and energy and effort that you all put into revising the performance framework. It was a 2-year collaboration in which you brought in outside expertise. We went back and forth. It went through the APA process. So there was a significant amount of work that went into it. And it includes our accountability grade as one of several metrics, which is aligned to NACSA's recommendations. So to go against that in this process seems strange and does seem arbitrary. It also includes a way in which you can give a school notice of concern. You can give corrective actions to schools. So if I'm sitting here and have received performance frameworks, and even though we didn't have the same performance framework as in previous years, we still have data from those from our first year, which excellent data from the only year without COVID. So we went through that process, and to ignore it after 2 years of work to get it there seems strange. The other piece that I will say is, if I had a parent come to me and say, Ms. Johnson, my kindergarten baby has received this grade, this progress report, this report card, no intervention plans, no notice of concerns, or no parent report, conferences where we talk about their progress, and then at the end of the year, not get promoted to the first grade. This is what that feels like. It feels like you've had 5 years to have, okay. And then the only other thing, please, Ms. Cook, I'm really trying to just add to the conversation.
We've gotten a lot from you.
The only other thing that I'll say is there's a big difference between a K-4 school and a K-5 school. If you were to compare our K-4 results to Smilo's K-4 results, there is a big difference. And to have that, to not look at it further and have that conversation or to understand the data, I think is a disservice to our kids.
Okay.
And I think we deserve the 5-year renewal.
Okay, thank you. Okay. All right, so I'll call for a vote. I'll restate the motion, and the motion is to renew Clarksdale for 4 years with conditions including requiring academic SMART plan for improvement, require SMART plan for monitoring and reporting, and require midterm site visits and school quality review. And I'll do a roll call. Lee Durrett?
Nay.
Okay, Don Hinton?
Aye.
Okay, Kimberly Remack?
Aye.
Okay, Candace Robbins? I didn't hear you, Candace.
Aye.
Nay? Okay. Marcy Scoggins?
Nay.
Nay? Okay. And Jennifer Whittier?
Aye.
Okay, and I vote aye. That is, so that motion carries. Okay. All right, now we'll move on to our next action item, which is Midtown renewal decision. And I will entertain a motion to accept the third-party evaluator's recommendation to renew Midtown for 3 years with the conditions in the report. Okay. I'm not hearing a motion. Is there any other motion regarding Midtown's renewal?
I have a motion.
Okay.
Jennifer Whittier.
Okay, what's your motion, Jennifer?
I would like to make a motion to approve a 4-year conditional renewal for Midtown Public Charter School with conditions being those recommended by the Learning Collective, with the exception of the condition regarding grade level expansion, allowing the school to serve kindergartners.
Okay. Is there a second to that motion?
I second that motion. Kimberly Remax.
Okay, Kimberly Remack is the second. Okay. Any discussion? And
This
yes.
is Leader. I mean,
Go ahead.
please, real
Yep,
quick.
yep.
Yeah, and listen, I don't want to beat a dead horse, but my comments for Clarksdale apply for Midtown as well. It again seems that when you look at the criteria, you look at what we've told them they had to do, that they've done that. And then, we're going to not give them the full 5 years. To me, again, that just doesn't seem right. I know someone said something earlier about setting some type of precedent, and I don't think we do that. I think what we realize is that we are young into our charter school organization, and there has to be some grace given for the fact that we are starting out, that we don't have this big time period to look back and look at data and make sure that everybody's okay. And so we have got to trust the very people, who we said, okay, you can start a charter school, and who have done what we've asked them to do in difficult situations. These schools don't get to pick who their students are. They're coming from failing school districts and failing schools, and we're asking something from them that our public schools can't do. And it just seems, again, that they have done what we've asked them to do in a very hard situation. And I think they deserve the benefit of a 5-year extension. And I won't restate what I said earlier, but it applies equally to Midtown as it does to Clarksdale. So, again, I would think they were entitled to a 5-year extension.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other questions, comments? Candace? Okay, go ahead.
So I just agree with Lee. I share the same sentiments as I did with Clarksdale that I do with Midtown. It seems like it's a punishment and a setback for the schools. And it feels like it will be just another barrier that they have to hurdle over, another just thing that I wish that we could be more flexible in, because we already have things that are set up to prevent any, and of course we can't see the future. Some things just happen. And just to add to what, or at least to agree to what Lee said, like you can't pick the students. And it's one of those things where, they don't know what deck of cards they're getting every year. They're getting a new deck of cards. They can be kids that are proficient, kids that are not, but every year they're being asked to pretty much pull a rabbit out of a hat in ways that other schools are not being asked to do that. And so when I think about individual schools that may have a child that may be in the 4th grade that is reading on the 1st grade level. And so while this particular school is celebrating that their child is now from a 2nd grade level to a 3rd grade level, that won't be reflected on the test. On the test, they just didn't meet 4th grade they didn't meet the 4th grade reading level. And so you aren't able to see that or score that in any way. And so I just wish that, and even being thoughtful in the future of how we do the entire system. I've not been shy from saying that the system that we have is, there's some holes, and I think that's with any system, because they're man-made, but I think we can improve on making those systems, filling in holes as we become aware of those blind spots that we have over time. And I think we have to be willing to do that, not just on our own, and not just getting third parties who don't have any commitments or any buy-ins with a lot of the schools, but also bringing all parties to the table when we're doing this, bringing in charter school representatives and other people like the head of schools and the teachers to help us, as an authorizer board, to be able to make better systems that will not necessarily, that will hold them accountable, but also be feasible and not a burden to them. So that's all.
Okay, thank you. Don, did you have a question or comment? I see you're unmuted.
Well, I was unmuted accidentally.
Okay, that's fine. Okay.
I would say that
Yes.
not renewing them would be the punishment. What we are considering here is renewing for a 4-year term, which is right in line with what, the statutory requirements are. I mean, with the goal of, if I recall right in the statute, of producing excellent results. I think the excellent side of that is there. And, I guess I've done a lot of reviewing of everything that's been presented here. A lot of going back and looking at the statute again to confirm everything. And I don't see a lesser renewal of the term as punishment. It could be as simple as, we have some concerns here when we're talking about kids' lives for 4 and 5 years. It's a heavy lift, and that's what the overall goal is to produce an outstanding thing. And where I would agree that, the framework outlines, a needs on the first page, let's say, that where it's all green, that doesn't mean that the report is green all the way through from beginning to end. There's no concerns at all anywhere in that report. Just, for that purpose. And what the purpose of that framework is not only to help the schools, but also for us, to help us base this decision right here. And there's a range of results that can happen depending on what all parts of that framework have. We have third-party evaluators to come in and look at additional information on top of the framework. I mean, they consider the framework as well. I read the letter carefully, and the question was, they said they didn't review the framework. Well, they did review the framework. And, I guess that would be all I have to say. None of these decisions are taken lightly by any of us, and none of them are in an absence of knowledge of the potential effects, with the hope that it's not a negative effect. So that would be my comment.
Okay, thank you.
I have an additional comment, unless someone else. Yeah, and so this is so I just
Candace, before you go, okay, I just want to see if any other board members have any other things to say before we go back to you.
Actually, I do.
Okay,
Kimberly Remat.
Okay.
I just want to reiterate that while we're all working in the best interest of children, we cannot disregard expert evaluations, and we cannot put aside those. We can certainly question those. We can thoughtfully consider that. We can thoughtfully consider the comments by the schools as well, because we all should be working on the same team. And I think for the most part, we are, but we have to use some wisdom and discernment in collecting all that information and doing what's in the best interest of the children. And with that, I'll.
Okay, thank you. Is Marcy or Jennifer, do you have a comment?
I have no comment.
Okay. Okay, Candace, go ahead. Oh, we can't hear you. I see you're unmuted, but I still can't hear. There.
Hear me now?
Yep.
Okay, yeah. So I just wanted to say that I wanted to respectfully disagree with you, Don, that we do want to have high quality schools, but you know, must we trample over, you know, the educators that are making this happen? I think it is a punishment. It may not be the ultimate punishment, but it's you know, you can punish people or entities or whatever in several ways without it being like, oh, well, we're not closing the school, but it still doesn't mean that it's not something that is not a consequence. And then additionally to Kim, I did want to respond to you, which I made earlier in my statement about the experts. They did not have accurate information, and they couldn't answer important questions. And so that's a problem. And if this is the high level of experts that we're getting our information from, I guess I'm just unsure of how that works, even if he couldn't even answer some basic questions. And so that was very concerning, and it is now, if we're still considering to call people who, and I'm not saying that they aren't highly qualified, but in this particular instance, they did not have the essential necessary data and information that was needed in order to present an arguable case. Well, I don't even say case, but as far as present enough information to say as to why not to give them a full 5 year. It wasn't enough information. Yeah, so there was.
All right, thank you. Before I call for a vote, I just want to clarify a couple of things. One, the evaluator did have the performance framework and had all the data provided by the school. So the data provided to the evaluator was by the schools in their renewal applications. I just want to clarify again the difference between the renewal application, and the performance framework. The performance framework is an annual evaluation that the charter authorizer board runs with the data, presents it to the school for review, and makes any adjustments if there are needed. And the renewal application comes up after your renewal cycle or upon your renewal cycle when you're so it's every several years, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, depending on how long you're renewed for. And then finally, just about public schools, no public school gets to choose the children that come through its doors. So I just feel strongly about that, getting that on the record. So now we'll move on to a vote. And Jennifer, I'll ask you to restate your motion, since it sounded like you had it very clearly stated there. Would you restate our motion for us?
Yes.
The motion second. Okay, this is the motion.
This is a motion to approve a 4-year conditional renewal for Midterm Public Charter School with conditions being those recommended by the Learning Collective, with the exception of the condition regarding grade level expansion, allowing the school to serve kindergartners.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, so now I'll do roll call. Lee Durrett?
Nay.
Nay. Don Hinton?
Aye.
Aye. Kimberly Remack?
Aye.
Candace Robbins?
Nay.
Okay. Marcy Scoggins?
Aye.
Okay. Jennifer Whittier?
Aye.
Okay. And I vote aye. So that motion carries. Okay. All right. So that concludes our action items for today. Our next meeting is the next regularly scheduled meeting will be on June 12th, 2023 at 1 p.m. At 239 North Lamar Street, Suite 207, Jackson, Mississippi 39201. And now I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Okay, thank you. From Kimberly Remack, may I get a second?
Second, Candace Robbins.
Okay, thank you. Any discussion? Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. Any opposed? Okay. The motion carries. Thank you, everybody.